My name is Maya Lewis, and the night everything changed started right after a family party in the mountains. I was driving home alone at 17, snow falling hard on the highway, when a truck skidded in front of me. The crash was instant metal crushing, glass exploding, my body folding in ways it shouldn't. At the hospital, the doctors said I needed emergency surgery within the hour, or I wouldn't make it. They called my mom. She was at a luxury spa with my sister, champagne in hand. Her answer was cold, almost bored. "If it dies, let me know. I don't have time for paperwork." When I finally woke up days later, my vision blurry and my ribs burning, I looked at the hospital chart hanging at the foot of my bed. Under legal guardian, my mother's name was gone. In its place was a different name, one I hadn't heard spoken in years, and that guardian was someone I never expected. If you've ever felt like you were nothing but a burden in your own family, then stay with me. And before I go deeper, where are you listening from? And what time is it for you right now? I grew up in a quiet suburb just outside Denver, the kind of neighborhood where kids rode bikes until sunset and every fall smelled like pine and chimney smoke. Back then, life felt simple, soft, even because my dad, Daniel Lewis, made it feel that way. He was a construction engineer, always coming home with dust in his hair and blueprints rolled under his arm, lifting me up like I weighed nothing. I was 5 when he died. They said it was an on-site collapse, a freak accident, one of those tragedies the news mentions once and forgets by morning. But I didn't forget. I remember the funeral vividly, the gray sky, the smell of cut flowers, the adults whispering in clumps, and my mother standing stiff, as if grief was something that would smudge her makeup. And I remember one more thing, an argument that broke the silence of the cemetery like a crack. A woman stood near the headstone, her hospital badge still clipped to her pocket, demanding to speak to my mother. Her voice was shaking with something deeper than anger. "You should have called me sooner," she said. "I didn't even know he was in the hospital." My mother snapped back loud enough for the whole row to hear. "You were busy with your perfect little doctor life. Don't pretend you cared about this family." That woman, Aunt Elise, looked at me only once. Her eyes softened in a way I didn't understand back then. My mother pulled me behind her, shielding me as if Elise were a threat. "You abandoned us," my mother hissed. "Now leave." Elise tried to speak again, but Mom grabbed my hand and yanked me toward the car. When I glanced back, the woman was still standing by Dad's grave, shoulders shaking, like she wasn't just losing a brother, she was losing something else too. After that day, her name became a quiet, poisoned shadow in our house. Anytime I asked who she was, my mother's answer was always the same. "She's nobody. Selfish. Left the family years ago. Don't ever look for her." And because I was sick, small, confused, desperate to please, I believed her. Life moved quickly after Dad passed. Too quickly. 1 year later, Mom married Bradley Dawson, the wealthy owner of a chain of luxury gyms across Colorado. He was everything my father wasn't. Loud, showy, always talking about money, always flashing something: watches, cars, influence. I remember him buying Mom a diamond bracelet the week they got engaged, and Mom giggling like a girl who had never known grief at all. When they moved into Bradley's modern, glass and steel house, Mom acted like we had finally made it. She redid the living room with white furniture I wasn't allowed to touch and turned the guest room into her dressing room filled with designer bags. I was 8 when Sienna was born. She arrived with the kind of celebration I had never seen before: pink balloons, catered brunches, gifts stacked taller than me. Everyone acted like she was a miracle. And maybe she was, to them. But I also watched something else happen. The world began orbiting her. Mom's voice changed, sweeter, quieter, coated in honey whenever she talked to Sienna. Bradley became the doting father he had never bothered to be with me. And I slowly faded into the background, like a piece of old furniture nobody wanted but didn't know how to throw away. The shift wasn't dramatic. It was slow and subtle, like melting ice. It started with comments. "You're the older one, Maya. Be responsible. You know Sienna is still little, let her have it. Don't be jealous. You're too old for toys anyway. Then came the space. My bedroom, once painted yellow with butterflies Dad helped me choose, was replaced by a crib and pastel wallpaper. They moved me into a small room next to the garage, the one that rattled every time the door opened. The walls were bare because Mom said we would decorate it later, but later never came. My bed was a mattress from Bradley's old guest room, sagging in the middle. Mom started calling me the big girl, the older one, or her daughter, but rarely by my name. Sometimes Bradley introduced me as Maya, Harmony's first kid, like I was a footnote. Meanwhile, Sienna grew up in the master suite's converted nursery, sunlight, plush rugs, new clothes every season, private swimming lessons, ballet classes, birthday parties with custom cakes shaped like princess castles. She got the world, and I learned how to make myself small. I got used to hand-me-downs, the broken laptop from Bradley's office, leftover dinner being the built-in babysitter. I wasn't abused, not in a way anyone could point to. I was simply forgotten, ignored, unchosen. And there is a special kind of ache that comes from realizing your existence isn't essential to the people who are supposed to love you most. By the time I turned 17, I had learned to cook, clean, study in silence, take the bus alone, fix things around the house, arrange Sienna's school snacks, and stay invisible. That invisibility became my shield. But it also became my wound. And all of that, the years of being quietly erased, the loneliness tucked into every corner of our house, the childhood spent tiptoeing, set the stage for what would happen the night of the family party. A night where one overheard phone call would shatter the last pieces of illusion I still held about my mother. A night that would lead me to the highway, the snowstorm, the crash, and the truth. The truth waiting on my hospital chart under the words, "New legal guardian." The night of the accident began beautifully, so beautifully, in fact, that I almost let myself believe I belonged somewhere. It was my maternal grandparents' birthday celebration, a rare joint party they held every few years, and the whole extended family had gathered at my aunt's mountain house near Estes Park. The air smelled like pine needles and spice cake, the kind of scent that sticks to your sweater long after you leave. Snowflakes drifted lazily outside the window, settling on the wooden deck and the cars parked along the gravel driveway. Inside, the house buzzed with warmth and noise, kids running around with mugs of hot chocolate, uncles throwing logs into the fireplace, aunts arguing over recipes, and my grandparents laughing in a way that made their eyes disappear into wrinkles. For once, I wasn't invisible. Cousins I rarely saw pulled me into card games. My grandmother insisted I sit next to her during dessert and kept piling more pie onto my plate. Someone gave me a Polaroid camera, and we spent half an hour taking flattering pictures of each other by the Christmas lights strung across the porch. I remember thinking, maybe this is what family is supposed to feel like. Maybe I'm not as alone as I think. And maybe that tiny spark of belonging made what happened next hurt even more. It started in the kitchen, while I was helping stack dessert plates. My hands were sticky with frosting, and I was laughing with two of my cousins about how burnt the first batch of cookies had been. My mother slipped into the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, lowering her voice as if she didn't want to be overheard. But she didn't lower it enough. "Yes, we booked the 3-day spa retreat at the Four Seasons," she said, her tone bubbling with pride. "Gold room upgrade, private sauna, champagne breakfast. And after that? Miami. Just me, Bradley, and Sienna. A little winter escape." I froze. Not because of the trip. I knew Mom traveled constantly without me, but because she sounded so happy, light. Like this was the real family, the real trio. Then her friend on the phone asked the question I will never forget. "What about Maya? Is she going with you?" My mother laughed. A small, sharp, dismissive sound. "Maya?" she repeated, like the name was unfamiliar. "Oh, she'll be fine. She's old enough to take care of herself. I'm not ruining my vacation because of her." My fingers slipped. The plate I was holding fell, hitting the counter with a dull sound before crashing to the floor. Mom didn't notice, or maybe she did and just didn't care. She kept talking, voice dripping with excitement as she described the oceanfront suite in Miami. I stood there, staring at the tiled floor, feeling something cold push against my ribs. I'd gotten used to being forgotten, overlooked, ignored. But hearing her choose a version of life where I simply did not exist, that was different. That was a wound with intention. One of my aunts walked in at that moment and asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine. I told everyone I had a headache and needed to rest. I told my grandparents I had homework. I told my cousins I was tired. All lies because the truth was too humiliating to speak out loud. They insisted I stay. They said the roads were getting icy. They offered me a blanket and the couch in the playroom. But the instinct I'd learned from childhood, the instinct to remove myself quietly before anyone realized they hadn't included me, kicked in. I said I needed to get home early. My cousin Mark, who lived nearby, tossed me the keys to his old Subaru. "Take it," he said. "That thing's been through 3 blizzards. Just text me when you get home, okay?" I nodded, forcing a smile. Outside, the snow had thickened into a curtain of white. I pulled my coat tighter and trudged toward the car, my boots crunching in the fresh powder. Before getting in, I looked back at the house, the yellow glow spilling from the kitchen windows, silhouettes laughing, the warmth I could never quite keep for myself. I didn't know it then, but this was the last moment of normalcy I would ever have before my life split cleanly into 2 parts, before the crash and after. I started the engine, turned onto the mountain road, and drove into the storm. And with every mile, the words I'd overheard kept replaying in my head. "She's old enough to take care of herself. I'm not ruining my vacation because of her." I didn't know the highway ahead was already coated in black ice. I didn't know a truck would swerve. I didn't know I would wake up weeks later with a different guardian's name on my chart. But in hindsight, maybe the storm had been waiting for me all along. Snow swallowed the highway the moment I left the mountain roads behind. What had been gentle flakes earlier turned into a white wall, sweeping sideways across the windshield in thick, frantic streaks. The wipers fought uselessly, smearing water and ice until everything outside looked like a blurred watercolor. The Subaru's heater groaned as cold air seeped in through the old vents. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel, knuckles pale, every muscle in my shoulders pulled tight. I kept telling myself it was fine, that I'd driven in Colorado winters all my life, that this storm was nothing new. But the truth was, the night felt wrong. The kind of wrong that sinks into your skin before your brain understands why. The road ahead glimmered unnaturally, an oily shine spreading over the asphalt, black ice. I eased off the gas, counting my breaths, trying to keep my mind from drifting back to my mother's voice in the kitchen. "I'm not ruining my vacation because of her." The words echoed inside the small, trembling car, louder than the wind. I blinked hard, pushing back the sting in my eyes. Crying would only make the windshield blurrier. I forced myself to focus. But focusing didn't matter, not when the pickup truck in front of me suddenly fishtailed. It jerked left, then right, trying desperately to regain control before slamming nose first into the concrete barrier. Its tail swung outward violently straight into my lane. I reacted without thinking. I jerked the wheel right, tires instantly losing grip. The Subaru spun, the world flipping sideways as snow and night swapped places in my vision. The sound hit next, a screech of metal grinding against metal, so sharp it carved through my ribs. The car slammed into the guardrail with a force that knocked my breath out. Airbags exploded open like white fists, punching my chest, my face, glass shattered. Something inside me cracked loud enough that I didn't know whether it was the car or my body. Pain shot through my stomach, my hips, my legs, then everything went silent. Silent in the way only pain can silence a person. Like the world took one long, dimming breath and held it. My head hit something hard. Lights flickered in my vision, then collapsed into black. When sound returned, it wasn't the storm anymore. It was chaos. Sharp, urgent voices cut through the dark like knives. Beeping machines. Rushing footsteps. A rolling bed's metal frame clattering against doorways. BP dropping, get her to trauma 1. Possible internal bleeding. Prep for CT now. My consciousness flickered in and out, gravity tilting beneath me. Cold air hit my skin as someone tore open the remains of my clothes. Hands pressed on my abdomen, sending pain shooting up my spine. I tried to speak, tried to say stop, tried to ask for someone, but only a broken rasp escaped. A bright white light seared across my eyes as they wheeled me under the oar lamps. We need consent for emergency surgery. Someone called out. She's 17, call the guardian listed. A nurse's fingers brushed my cheek. Hang in there, sweetheart, we're contacting your mom. I wanted to warn her, wanted to say that calling my mother was useless, that she wouldn't come, not tonight, not ever, not when she was wrapped in a silk robe somewhere with a glass of champagne. But my mouth wouldn't open. My body was shutting down, drifting towards some distant place where the alarms sounded slower and farther away. I caught bits of conversation. Abdominal trauma. Possible spleen involvement. Pelvic fracture, unstable. Prep for transfusion. The nurse rummaged through a tray at my bedside, then spoke again. Her phone smashed. Trying emergency contacts. Here, Mom, Harmony. Calling now. I didn't hear the phone ring. I didn't hear my mother answer. I only heard the doctor grow more frantic. We don't have long. If we don't get consent, try her again, the nurse insisted. Tell her her daughter might not make it. My heartbeat thudded dully, slowing, like footsteps in snow. Someone squeezed my hand. Stay with us, Maya. But my mind was already folding inward, collapsing into itself like a dying star. A sudden jolt of pain ripped through me, my body's last protest before everything turned to a deep, suffocating black. The last thing I saw was the ceiling dissolving, the light fading into a tunnel. The last thing I heard was the doctor's voice, far away, desperate. We need that signature now. And the very last thing I felt was the instinctive, heartbreaking certainty that my mother wasn't going to pick up the phone. Not for me, not even to save my life. The hospital lights faded from my awareness, but somewhere outside that collapsing darkness, life went on in a completely different universe, one soaked in warmth, gold, music, and laughter. While my body fought to stay alive under the blinding white of the ER lamps, my mother and sister were lounging in plush robes inside a luxury spa suite at the Four Seasons downtown Denver. Soft instrumental music floated through the air, candles flickered around marble walls, and gold leaf face masks glimmered on their skin. Champagne glasses clinked gently each time they toasted to a perfect girls' night. The contrast between their world and mine could not have been sharper. I was bleeding out on a metal table. They were choosing between exfoliating scrubs. I was unconscious. They were taking selfies. At some point, a nurse managed to force my cracked phone to restart just long enough to place a FaceTime call to the contact labeled Mom, Harmony. That call, one single call, held my life inside it. The spa suite was dim and warm, lit with soft amber lights, when my mother's iPad chimed. She groaned at the interruption, annoyed that anything dared intrude on her night of luxury. "Who is calling me at this hour?" she muttered, wiping a drop of champagne from her lip. Sienna giggled, her face mask shimmering. "Probably one of your followers, Mom. Just ignore it." But Mom reached over lazily and tapped accept. The screen flipped, and suddenly the spa's golden glow illuminated something horrific me. Or rather, the fragments of me the nurse held the phone over. My bloodied face. The oxygen mask strapped over my mouth. The gash on my forehead. My chest rising unevenly. The faint, relentless beeping of my weakening heart. The nurse's voice came urgent and tight. "Mrs. Dawson? This is Denver Mercy Hospital. Your daughter Maya has been in a severe accident. She needs emergency surgery within the hour or she may not survive. We need your consent immediately." For a second, the spa room froze. Even the music seemed to hush. My mother's brows knit together, but not in fear, only irritation. Is this a joke? She snapped. No, ma'am, the nurse replied. Maya is critically injured, internal bleeding, pelvic fracture, possible cranial impact. We need your authorization to operate. My mother sighed dramatically and leaned back into her plush chair as if this news were nothing more than a minor inconvenience, like someone had spilled a drink on her carpet. Then she said the sentence that would later echo in the courtroom, in police reports, in nightmares. If it dies, let me know. I'm not leaving my spa. The nurse blinked, stunned. Ma'am, maybe you didn't hear me. Your daughter might not make it. If we don't operate— I heard you, Mom interrupted, bored. And I'm telling you I'm not coming. I don't have time for paperwork. Call someone else or— I don't know, figure it out. She made a vague, waving gesture with her champagne glass as if signing consent for her own child's life was too trivial to bother with. Behind her, Sienna burst into laughter. Actual laughter. Oh my God, Mom, look, she said, tilting her phone toward the iPad screen while live streaming. This spa day is insane. We look like royalty. In her live stream, just a sliver of the iPad screen was visible enough to show the nurse, the blood, the chaos behind her. Sienna didn't even notice. She was too busy posing. The nurse swallowed hard, voice trembling between desperation and disbelief. Mrs. Dawson, this is your child. If we don't get a legal guardian signature, she could die. Do you understand this is your responsibility under Colorado law? Mom rolled her eyes. I told you already no. I'm not signing anything tonight. I have plans. Call her father. Her father is deceased, the nurse said quietly. Mom sighed again, louder this time, annoyed at being reminded. Well, call someone else. I'm at the spa. I'm not dealing with this. One of the doctors behind the nurse leaned toward her and whispered, record this, for the hospital report later. She's refusing care for a minor. The nurse nodded subtly before trying once more. Ma'am, please. She's 17. She's unconscious. She's unstable. She needs you. My mother looked straight into the camera, and for a split second, her face was illuminated by the soft spa lights. Perfect, polished, empty. If she dies, she said coldly, send me a text. Then she hung up. No trembling, no hesitation, no fear, just dismissal. As though she were declining a telemarketer. The nurse stared at the screen, stunned, the reflection of the spa suite dissolving into darkness as the call ended. Meanwhile, champagne bubbles continued to fizz, music played, Sienna danced around with her phone. And miles away, my heartbeat weakened beneath hospital lights. The medical team stared at each other, horrified not just at the mother who refused to save her child, but at the chilling ease with which she'd done it. One of the surgeons murmured under his breath, I've never heard anything like that. Get this documented. She'll need this when she wakes up. If she wakes up, another whispered. And while the spa door remained firmly closed, the hospital doors flew open with urgency, not because someone had come for me, but because someone would have to sign for me. Someone, somewhere, had to choose me. Because my mother already had, and she had chosen not to. While the spa call ended in cold silence, the trauma unit had no time to process the horror of what they'd just witnessed. Maya's vitals were still dropping. Her blood pressure was unstable. They needed a signature, any signature from someone legally tied to her. The nurse who had made the FaceTime call forced herself to swallow the lump in her throat and flipped through the medical file again, desperate. And that desperation is what led her finger to a name she hadn't noticed before. Emergency contact, to Dr. Elise Hart. The nurse blinked. Hart? Who? She tapped the entry, and a second page opened, one sealed with a digital signature from 8 years earlier. At the top, bolded in the hospital's legal software, was a line that made the nurse inhale sharply. Secondary legal guardian pending verification. Below it, in handwriting that had faded slightly in the scan, was a signature. Daniel Lewis. Maya's father. The nurse's heart thudded. She called over the charge doctor and the on-call legal officer. They stared at the document, scrolling through the attached forms: power of attorney, emergency guardianship authorization, notarized copies, and the most striking part, a letter from Daniel stating that, in the event of my incapacity or death, or if my daughter's mother proves unable or unwilling to act in Maya's best interest, I designate my sister, Dr. Elise Hart, as secondary legal guardian. There was no time for shock. Call her, the doctor said. Immediately. Across the city, in the pediatric neurosurgery wing of St. Catherine's Medical Center, a woman in sea green scrubs was peeling off her gloves after a 12-hour surgery. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun, wisps sticking to her forehead from sweat. Her eyes looked exhausted but sharp, the eyes of someone used to carrying the weight of children's lives in her hands. The phone at the nurse's station rang. Dr. Hart? A call for you, urgent. Elise pressed the phone to her ear, fully expecting another consult or a follow-up. She had no idea her world was about to crack open. Is this Dr. Elise Hart? The voice asked. Yes, this is she. This is Denver Mercy Hospital. Are you the designated emergency guardian for a minor named Maya Lewis? The name hit her like a physical blow. She straightened. Yes, she said, breath catching. Yes, is she okay? There was a pause. Not a good one. She's been in a severe accident. Internal bleeding. Pelvic instability. We need consent for immediate surgery. We attempted to reach her mother, but she refused. Nonus. Elise closed her eyes, grief and fury mixing into something sharp. Of course Harmony refused. Of course she did. I'm coming, Elise said, already grabbing her coat. Tell the surgeon I'll sign. Start prepping. Do not wait for me to arrive to stabilize her. Although, we need physical signature. I'll be there in 10 minutes, she said, even though it would take at least 15 in the storm. She hung up and sprinted to the elevators. The snow was coming down hard now, turning the city into a blur of white. Elise's tires skidded once, but she tightened her grip on the wheel and kept going. Her mind was racing as fast as the storm outside. And then the flashback hit, uninvited, vivid. It had been 8 years earlier. Her brother, Daniel, had shown up at her apartment with a folder in his hands. Liz, he'd said softly, sitting beside her on the couch, I need to ask you something hard. She had known something was wrong just by the way he looked at her, the heaviness in his shoulders, the exhaustion in his eyes. I love Harmony, he began. But she changes. She shuts down. She walks away from anything difficult. And Maya, she needs someone steady. He placed the folder in her lap. If anything ever happens to me or if I'm gone and Harmony can't be trusted, promise me you'll take care of Maya. Elisa had blinked at him, stoned. Dan, are you sick? Are you in trouble? No, he said, smiling tiredly. I just know life, and I know people. And I know Maya deserves someone who won't leave. He asked her to sign the papers as secondary guardian. She did, without hesitation. And she kept her promise to be ready, no matter what. But after his death, Harmony shut Elise out completely, twisted the narrative, made sure Maya never saw her. Elise had respected Maya's stability, hoping Harmony wasn't as reckless as she feared. But tonight proved the truth she always sensed. Harmony had never deserved the role she abandoned so easily. And now Elise was driving through a snowstorm to keep a promise that had waited 8 long years. When Elise burst through the hospital doors, still in scrubs and with snow in her hair, the trauma team almost sighed with relief. I'm here for Maya Lewis, she said, flashing her ID. Where do I sign? The legal officer met her halfway, holding a stack of printed documents. We verified the notarization. The hospital's legal department confirms this qualifies under Colorado's emergency guardianship statute given the mother's refusal and the father's pre-established authorization. Although, Elise didn't wait to finish the explanation. She signed every line, every page, her pen moving with fierce determination. Finally, she looked up at the lead surgeon. "Do everything you can, she's not alone anymore." The surgeon nodded. "We'll take it from here, Dr. Hart." As they wheeled Maya toward the operating room, Elise stayed just outside the doors, hands clasped, chest rising unsteadily. Her voice was barely a whisper, but strong enough to carry its vow into the sterile air. "Hang on, Maya. I'm here, your father sent me." 18 days passed before the world returned to me. Not gradually, not softly, more like surfacing from the bottom of a frozen lake, air ripping into my lungs as my consciousness clawed its way upward. My eyes opened to a ceiling I didn't recognize, pale and sterile, humming faintly with fluorescent lights. Every sound felt muffled, as if someone had wrapped the entire room in cotton. My head throbbed in a deep, rhythmic way that made my vision blur at the edges. My throat was raw. My right leg felt heavy, too heavy, encased in a cast that stretched from my thigh to my ankle. I tried to speak, but all that came out was a broken, rasping breath. I couldn't move much, couldn't lift my arms, couldn't understand where I was or how long I'd been there. For a moment, panic crawled up my spine. Am I dying? And then footsteps. Soft, steady, practiced. I forced my eyes to focus, and a woman came into view, a shape at first, then a face. Not my mother's, not even close. She wore a white coat, her hair tied back loosely, dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't slept in weeks. But her expression was warm in a way I didn't recognize from home. Not soft out of pity, soft in a way that felt personal. Familiar. She moved into the light and I saw her clearly. Something inside me tugged, a memory I couldn't quite reach. She smiled. A small, careful smile meant not to overwhelm someone who'd just climbed back from the edge. "Hi, Maya," she said gently. Her voice sounded like it belonged in another lifetime, one before the cold, one before the loneliness. "I'm Elise, your father's sister." For a second, the world tilted again. Aunt Elise. The ghost. The forbidden name. The woman Mom had painted as selfish, absent, uncaring. My mother had practically banned her existence from our home. And yet here she was sitting beside me, watching over me, looking nothing like the villain I'd been taught to imagine. My attempt at speaking failed, air scraping painfully at my throat. Elise noticed instantly and reached for a small whiteboard on the bedside table, placing the marker in my weak fingers. My hand trembled violently as I wrote the only question pounding through my skull. "Where's my mom?" Elise read the words, and something flickered across her face, not pity, not anger, but a truth she didn't want to make heavier than it already was. She pulled a chair closer and sat down. "Maya," she said softly, "your mom knows everything." The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. My heart tightened. She knows. And she isn't here. She never came. Elise reached for my hand, her touch steady and warm. "And I signed the papers," she continued. "I authorized the surgery that saved your life." I blinked at her, confusion and disbelief hitting me so fast it made my body tense. She squeezed my hand gently. "You're safe now. That's what matters." Safe. It was such a foreign word to me that I didn't know how to hold it. A nurse entered then, checking my monitors with the relieved smile of someone who'd been waiting weeks for this moment. "Welcome back, sweetheart," she said. "We've been waiting for you." She turned to Elise. "She's awake enough to see it." Elise nodded. The nurse walked to the foot of the bed and pulled the laminated patient chart into view, lowering it where I could read. My eyes moved slowly, struggling to focus on the black text. Then I saw it. Legal guardian. Dr. Elise Hart. Where my mother's name should have been, where it had always been, was a woman I hadn't seen since Dad's funeral. A woman who had driven through a blizzard, who dropped everything, who didn't hesitate. A woman who had chosen me when I couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, couldn't even know she was there. A sound broke out of me, part sob, part gasp. My body shook, pain radiating from my ribs as tears flooded without my permission. But the tears weren't just from the physical agony, they came from the truth settling into my bones. Someone picked me. Someone stayed. Someone saw my life as something worth saving. Elise stood, leaning over to wipe my tears with the corner of a tissue. "It's okay," she whispered. "You're not alone anymore, Maya. I'm here." And for the first time in 17 years, I believed it. Moving into Elise's apartment felt like stepping into a world that had been waiting for me long before I ever knew it existed. It wasn't big, just a modest two-bedroom place on the third floor of an older brick building near the hospital. The hallway smelled faintly of coffee and laundry detergent, and the floors creaked when you walked too close to the heater vents. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't shiny. But it was warm. And that alone made it feel like another planet compared to the house I grew up in. Elise had set up the spare room for me: fresh sheets, soft blankets, a nightlight in case the recovery pain kept me up, even a small shelf with books she thought I might like. The walls were covered with framed photos of my dad when he was younger, some of him in a baseball cap holding a fishing pole, some of him and Elise sitting on the hood of an old car, laughing like they had all the time in the world. There were also diplomas, medical awards, and sticky notes. Elise had scribbled to herself one right above my bed that read, "You are not disposable." I stared at that note for a long time the first night. I had never seen a sentence like that written for me. Elise wasn't just a doctor. She became everything: my ride to appointments, my hand to hold when physical therapy reduced me to shaking tears, my quiet coach who taught me how to shift from wheelchair to walker, from walker to crutches, and eventually to a pair of sleek silver forearm crutches she bought because she thought they looked strong, not sad. She cooked simple meals: soups, mashed vegetables, oatmeal, the kind my mother never bothered to learn. She set alarms for my medication and stayed up on the nights I woke gasping from pain or nightmares. Some mornings she'd come home after a 36-hour shift, drop her keys on the counter, and still insist on helping me stretch so I wouldn't lose muscle. "You're healing," she would tell me. "And healing is work. I'm proud of you." Proud. I didn't know how hungry I'd been for that word until it finally arrived. While my world shrank to rehab sessions and quiet evenings in Elise's apartment, another world, my old world, was spiraling. Elise's lawyer, partnered with the hospital's legal department, filed an official report to the state: abandonment and refusal of medical consent for a minor. That alone was enough to trigger mandatory state intervention. The hospital added the FaceTime recording, the call logs, the refusal transcript. The case landed on a judge's desk within 48 hours. Meanwhile, my mother and Sienna were still in Miami, posting bikini shots, spa photos, inspirational quotes about self-care and choosing yourself, completely unaware that their lives were about to ignite. They didn't visit, not once. Not a message, not a call to the hospital. Nothing. If they even remembered I existed, they certainly weren't showing it. But if they weren't thinking of me, the world was starting to think about them. When Mom and Sienna finally returned to Denver, sunburned and smiling, the first thing waiting for them wasn't a warm welcome home. It was a court summons. The second thing waiting was Bradley furious. His gym franchise had been contacted by reporters. The leaked spa clip had spread. Sienna's live stream had accidentally captured a sliver of the FaceTime, including the nurse's frantic face and part of my blood-covered hospital gown. The comments under Sienna's video had exploded: screenshots, speculation, anger. People recognized the hospital's backdrop. People asked questions. Influencer gossip accounts dug deeper. Someone identified my mother from her public LinkedIn profile: senior HR director at a major Denver corporation. It didn't take long for the company to act. She was placed on indefinite suspension for conduct unbecoming of a company representative, especially one responsible for employee welfare. HR directors, apparently, are not supposed to tell hospitals to text them if it dies. Bradley panicked when he realized how bad it looked. He called his PR team. He called lawyers. He tried to distance himself publicly. Privately, he yelled at my mother for jeopardizing his brand, his gyms, his sponsorships. He hired a financial advisor to separate their accounts just in case. Meanwhile, mom influencer groups, online ones my mother had proudly participated in, always flaunting her perfect lifestyle, began dissecting the leaked footage. They noticed the champagne in her hand, the mask on her face, the way she said "if it dies" instead of "if she dies." They called it out for what it was: cruelty, neglect, narcissism caught on camera. A few small blogs picked up the story. Then a larger local news page did. Then it spread. And while my mother and sister's feeds turned off comments to stop the flood of backlash, Elise and I continued our quiet routine: doctor visits, therapy, slow walks, bowls of soup, nighttime pain meds, gentle encouragement. The contrast between the two worlds felt unreal. In one, my mother and sister were fighting PR fires, scrambling to defend their reputations, drowning in the consequences of their own indifference. In the other, Elise was teaching me how to breathe through pain, how to balance on one leg, how to shower with a cast without slipping, how to accept help without shame. Karma wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't arrive like a storm. It arrived exactly the way my mother had treated me: quietly, dismissively, gradually. Just enough to make her feel the weight of every choice she'd made. And while her world cracked apart piece by piece, I finally felt something I had never known growing up. Safety. Not luxury. Not approval. Not perfection. Just safety. And for the first time, that was enough. Family court did not look like the dramatic courtroom scenes I'd seen on TV. It was smaller, quieter, almost sterile: white walls, wooden chairs, a faint smell of old paper and cold air from the vent above. But the weight inside that room felt heavier than anything I had carried on my crutches or in my cast. I sat in a wheelchair that Elise had helped me into earlier that morning, my legs still immobilized, my ribs wrapped tight under my sweater. Elise sat beside me, spine straight, hands clasped, calm in the way only someone who had faced life and death decisions daily could be. Our lawyer, a woman with sharp eyes and a softer tone, stood before the judge. Mom and Sienna sat across the room with their own attorney. They both looked smaller somehow. Mom's hair wasn't styled. She wasn't wearing designer clothes. She kept wringing her hands, glancing around as if waiting for someone to rescue her from the consequences she never imagined she'd face. Sienna was glued to her phone until the bailiff told her to put it away. The judge cleared his throat. "We are here today to review emergency guardianship and allegations of parental neglect related to minor Maya Lewis." The words settled over me like cold water. The lawyer began with the facts: the crash, the surgery, the need for urgent consent. Then she pulled up the evidence: the FaceTime call. The moment it appeared on the courtroom screen, my stomach clenched. Hearing the call had been traumatizing enough at the hospital. Seeing it in the full, polished quiet of a courtroom felt worse. The nurse's frantic voice echoed through the room. "Your daughter is critically injured. She may not survive." Then my mother's voice, flat, annoyed, chilling. "If it dies, let me know. I'm not leaving my spa." A ripple went through the room: quiet gasps, a shifting of feet, even the judge's eyebrows rising slightly. And then came the laughter, the unmistakable giggle from Sienna, half covered by the edge of her live stream frame. The nurse's desperate follow-ups. My mother's cold refusals. The click as she hung up. The courtroom fell silent except for the hum of the projector. My mother dabbed at the corner of her eye with a tissue, but no tears fell. Her lawyer rushed to speak. "Your Honor, Mrs. Dawson was under extraordinary stress. The situation was unclear. She did not fully understand the severity. I told them to call someone else." Mom interrupted loudly, voice shaking. "I didn't know she was dying. The angle, the lighting, anyone could misunderstand." The judge held up a hand. "Mrs. Dawson, you will remain silent until spoken to." Her mouth snapped shut. The lawyer continued. We believe the clip has been taken out of context. The phone was held at a strange angle. It sounded like a prank at first, and the language she used, while unfortunate, does not prove intent to neglect. Elise's lawyer didn't even need to argue. The evidence did it itself. But she still stepped forward. Your Honor, we also have additional documentation. She clicked to the next slide. The text messages. Sienna's group chat. A picture of me, bloody, limp, unconscious, taken from the FaceTime, with Sienna's caption, "Lol dramatic." Several of her friends responded with laughing emojis, others with disbelief. Someone even typed, "Is she actually hurt?" Sienna's face turned bright red as the messages filled the screen. That was supposed to be private, she blurted. Someone hacked. It was obtained legally, the lawyer replied coolly. And it demonstrates a disturbing pattern of indifference toward Maya's welfare. The judge looked down at the papers in front of him. Mrs. Dawson, he said slowly, do you wish to respond to the allegation that you refused medically necessary consent for your child? Mom inhaled sharply. I was overwhelmed. I didn't mean it literally. Parents say things they don't mean. I was exhausted, confused. It was a spa, there was noise, and I just didn't process what was happening. She placed a hand against her chest dramatically. I love my daughter. Our lawyer's voice cut gently through the air. Your Honor, may I call Dr. Hart? Elise stood. Collected. Controlled. Stronger than I'd ever felt in that house, stronger than anyone else in the room. She walked to the stand and was sworn in. Then she spoke, not with anger, but with clarity. I am Daniel Lewis's sister, she said. After his death, I attempted to remain in Maya's life, but Harmony, Mrs. Dawson blocked all communication. She insisted I had abandoned the family, which was untrue. Her gaze flicked toward Mom briefly, but she didn't linger. My brother knew Harmony's tendencies. He knew she often avoided responsibility under stress. He asked me 8 years ago to sign documents naming me as the secondary guardian in case anything happened to him. The lawyer displayed the notarized documents on the screen. The judge leaned forward. Mom stiffened. Elise continued. When the hospital called, I was finishing a surgery. I drove through a snowstorm to sign the paperwork. I stayed with Maya for the entire 18 days she was unconscious. She paused. Her voice softened. I'm not here out of vengeance. I'm here because Maya deserves stability, care, and someone who chooses her. Something broke open in me then. Because it was true, Elise chose me. My mother never had. The judge folded his hands. I have heard enough. Everyone shifted. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Given the overwhelming evidence of neglect, he said, and the minor's recent life-threatening circumstances, I am granting temporary full guardianship to Dr. Elise Hart. My mother gasped, covering her mouth. Sienna muttered something under her breath. Furthermore, the judge continued, Mrs. Dawson is to have limited, supervised contact only. An investigation into her conduct as a parent will proceed immediately. The gavel struck. And just like that, my world shifted again, but this time, toward safety. I felt Elise's hand slip over mine. It's okay, she whispered. You're protected now. For the first time in my life, I believed her. Spring melted slowly into early summer by the time the final hearing arrived. 3 months had passed since the crash, 3 months of slow progress, painful therapy sessions, trembling steps, and emotional unpacking I never realized I needed. I could walk with crutches now, my legs still stiff and tender but functional. The nightmares had eased. My breaths no longer felt like tiny knives under my ribs. And Elise, she never let me do a single step of that journey alone. She drove me to therapy before dawn. She massaged my leg on nights when the muscle spasms made me cry. She left sticky notes everywhere, proud of you, one step at a time, you are loved. The closer we got to the final hearing, the quieter I became. Not because I was afraid I had been afraid my entire life, but because I finally knew what courage felt like. Courage wasn't loud. It was steady. And I felt steady for the first time. The courthouse looked less intimidating than before, but maybe that was because I wasn't facing it alone this time. Elise walked beside me as I moved slowly on my crutches. Our lawyer held the door open. Even the security guard recognized us by now and nodded with a small smile. In the courtroom, my mother was already seated. She looked smaller than ever, tired, pale, clutching tissues that she never seemed to use. Bradley sat next to her, jaw tight, eyes forward. Sienna wasn't there. Not required, her lawyer had said, but everyone knew the truth. She didn't want to face me. Elise squeezed my shoulder before we Saturday. "You don't have to speak if it's too much," she whispered. But I knew I did. For myself, for my dad. For the little girl who grew up thinking she didn't matter enough for anyone to stay. When the judge finally called the case, the room fell into a hush. Our lawyer summarized the months of evidence, my recovery, the psychological evaluation, the details of the abandonment report, the spa recording, the guardianship paperwork my father had prepared years before. Then the judge looked at me. "Maya," he said gently, "if you feel strong enough, you may speak." I shifted, gripping the crutches as I pushed myself to stand. Pain shot up my hip, but I didn't sit back down. I wanted to look him in the eye. I wanted my mother to see me standing broken, but upright. "Thank you, Your Honor," I began, my voice trembling but clear. "I listened to that recording again last week. The one where my mom—" I swallowed hard. "Where Harmony says, 'If it dies, let me know.'" Mom dropped her head into her hands. I didn't stop. I thought I was used to not being chosen. Growing up, I was the older daughter, the helper, the extra. Not the priority. Not the child worth celebrating. I told myself it didn't matter. That families were imperfect. That being forgotten was just part of my role. My crutches dug into the carpet as I steadied myself. But hearing that sentence, hearing her talk about me like I wasn't a person at all, it shattered something I didn't even know was breakable. Because it proved that I wasn't wrong. I was disposable to her. The judge's expression softened. I took a shaky breath. But then I looked at what happened afterward. Dr. Hart, my aunt, showed up the second she found out. She left work, drove through a storm, and signed the papers that saved my life. I looked at Elise then. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, but she kept her chin high. She slept in a plastic chair every night I was unconscious. She held my hand during therapy. She worked 36-hour shifts and still made sure I ate dinner. She gave me a home. A safe one. A home where I didn't have to shrink myself to fit. My throat tightened. So when people ask what I want from this hearing, it isn't money. It isn't revenge. It isn't even an apology. I just want the court to acknowledge that I deserve someone who chooses me before a spa day or a vacation. I deserve someone who doesn't treat my life like an inconvenience. Silence washed over the room. Even Bradley shifted uncomfortably. My mother finally looked up, mascara streaked but eyes hollow. Her lawyer whispered something, but she barely reacted. It was too late for performance. Too late for excuses. Too late for anything. The judge leaned forward, hands folded. "Thank you, Maya." He took a moment, scanning the documents before him, tapping his pen softly. Then he delivered the decision that would redraw the entire map of my life. "In consideration of the evidence, the testimony, and the best interests of the minor," he said, "the court hereby terminates the parental rights of Harmony Dawson." My mother let out a sharp, wounded gasp, one that sounded more like humiliation than heartbreak. Further, the judge continued, "Full legal guardianship is granted to Dr. Elise Hart. When Maya reaches legal adulthood, she may petition for adoption by Dr. Hart, which this court will fully support if both parties consent." Hull. Elise placed a hand over her chest, stunned. My vision blurred, not from pain. From relief. Additionally, the judge said, voice firm, "Mrs. Dawson and Mr. Bradley Dawson will compensate the hospital for all unpaid medical expenses related to Maya's emergency care. Mrs. Dawson is also ordered to complete an intensive parental responsibility program. A faint whisper ran through the courtroom. Everyone recognized the humiliation of that sentence. Harmony's career, reputation, and carefully crafted public image were gone. The judge closed the file. This hearing is adjourned. With a single crack of the gavel, the past 17 years finally loosened their grip on me. Elise moved to my side instantly, steadying me as I lowered myself into the chair. "You did so well," she whispered. But I wasn't thinking about the courtroom anymore. I was thinking about my dad. And how maybe, just maybe, he knew this moment would come. As we left the room, I felt something I had never felt walking beside my mother. Chosen. Wanted. Home. I turned 21 on a quiet Sunday morning in late October, the kind of morning when the air feels thin and bright and the world seems just a little gentler than usual. My birthday didn't come with balloons or a big celebration. There weren't any fancy dinners, no long speeches, no performative smiles posing for Instagram. Instead, it was exactly the way I wanted it: simple, warm, and honest. I woke up to the smell of coffee and the sound of sizzling eggs. Elise was humming in the kitchen off-key as always, and I smiled before I even opened my eyes. It still amazed me sometimes how ordinary joy felt when you didn't have to earn it. How quiet love could be when no one was withholding it. How safe a home felt when nobody inside it wished you were someone else. That morning, there was a small envelope on the table with my name on it. "Happy 21st, honey," it read, in Elise's familiar handwriting. Inside was a hiking map with a little star drawn over the trail we used to walk when I was relearning how to stand after the accident. It wasn't about the map, it was about the memory. About how she carried me, literally and figuratively, through the hardest days of my life. After breakfast, she grinned and pointed at the calendar. "It's Friday. Pizza tonight?" "As always," I laughed. Our rituals had become the architecture of my adulthood. Friday night pizza, no matter what. Sunday morning hikes if her schedule allowed. Post-it notes stuck on the fridge, hers telling me to drink water, mine reminding her to eat something other than granola bars during her shifts. Movies on rainy evenings. Quiet conversations on the balcony after long days. It wasn't perfect, it was real. And because it was real, I healed. I'd graduated a few months earlier with a degree in social work and psychology from Metro State University. I didn't choose it because it was easy, far from it. I chose it because I wanted to become the kind of adult I once needed. Someone who could see kids slipping through the cracks. Someone who could recognize invisible bruises and quiet fears. Someone who could choose the child no one else chose. Now I worked at a youth resource center downtown, a place for teens who had been abandoned, ignored, neglected, or simply pushed aside by the people who were supposed to love them. The job wasn't glamorous. Sometimes it was heartbreaking. But every time I sat across from a scared 16-year-old who thought their life didn't matter, I remembered myself at 17 on that snowy highway. I remembered the loneliness, the fear, the ache of not being chosen. And I told them what someone once told me: "You are not disposable." Most days, they believed me. Eventually, I believed it too. Legally, I had become a Hart as well as a Lewis. On my 18th birthday, Elise and I stood in front of a judge, the same small courtroom where my entire life had changed, and I signed the papers she'd quietly hoped I'd sign. Maya Hart Lewis. Seeing the hyphen between our names made something inside my chest settle, like a long unbalanced scale finally leveling out. It wasn't about erasing my past. It was about anchoring myself to someone who had anchored me first. The adoption certificate still sits framed on Elise's bookshelf, right beside a picture of her and my dad when they were teenagers. I don't look at it every day. I don't need to. I feel it every day instead. As for Harmony and Sienna, they moved states away about a year after the final ruling. New city, new home, new last name. They scrubbed their social media accounts, deleted photos, blocked comments, pretended the scandal had never happened. They didn't reach out. And I didn't either. The silence wasn't cold. It was clean. It was closure. The kind you don't announce, the kind you don't mourn. Sometimes people ask if I miss them. I don't know how to answer that honestly. I miss the idea of a mother, a version of her that never existed, a version I spent my childhood inventing to survive. But I don't miss the woman who left me on a hospital table to die. And I don't miss the sister who turned my blood into a joke online. Missing them would require there to be something real to miss. Instead, I have something real now. Every Friday night, Elise and I share pizza from the tiny shop around the corner, the one with mismatched chairs and the owner who still forgets to charge us for extra toppings. We sit on the couch, my cast long gone, my crutches retired to a closet, my bones healed but my soul patched in ways that matter more. Sometimes she falls asleep halfway through a movie. Sometimes I do. But we're home. Together. And every once in a while, after a long day at the center, I'll catch Elise watching me with this expression, soft, proud, almost maternal and almost afraid, like she still can't believe she gets to be here. I always smile back. Because she is the reason I am here. People think family is blood, genetics, shared features, matching last names. But they're wrong. Family is the person who shows up when the storm hits. Family is the one who signs the paperwork when everyone else is too busy at the spa. Family is the one who drives through the snow, not away from it. Family is the one who chooses you not because they have to, not because it looks good, not because it's convenient, but because your life matters to them. So, if you're listening to this, if you've ever felt like the forgotten child, the extra one, the one left behind, I want you to hear me clearly. The person who will choose you may not be in your family tree. They might be a teacher, a neighbor, a mentor, a doctor, a stranger who becomes something more, or someone your parents tried to erase. But they exist. And when they show up, you'll understand the truth I learned on the hardest night of my life. Real family is the one who signs the paperwork when everyone else is busy at the spa.